Hello. So, Silksong is on the horizon, huh? What a... Sorry. What a ride it's been. I started playing Hollow Knight in summer of 2017 and... Sorry guys, guess I'm coming down with something. Anyways, it was the summer of 2017 and... I think something's happening. Yeah, so this is a thing now. Anyways, it was the summer of 2017, and I had just finished playing Breath of the Wild. If you didn't know, they released them a week apart in March of that year. And I needed a new casual game to play. One of my friends had only beaten False Knight, but still said I should give it a try, and at only $10, it was pretty hard to say no. So I bought it, installed the game, and... Yes! Oh my god! Why did I just do that? Woo! I'm a god! What? Excuse me? Oh my god! Oh my god! I did it! I did it! That was a 2-cycle! What the hell? What the hell? What is happening? This isn't fair! This isn't fair! What is happening? Please make it stop! What is happening? Oh my god, okay, it went away. How is nobody dead yet? That's actually insane. Oh my god! Mike and the bamboo stick, they're coming in the house! Oh! I did the test! I did the test thing. All these. Not even close. Get fucked! Jump. Oh my god, there's no way that's not it. There's no way. There's actually no way. Welcome. So, yeah. I figure now is as good a time as any to do a little retrospective on my experience as a Hollow Knight player. Like the title says, I've accrued over 3,000 hours, 3,317 as of writing this, to be exact, during my tenure. This is split between casual play, which only took around 30 hours, with a solid 90% of it being speedrun learning, practicing, running, and the last 9% being challenge runs, ranging from blindfolded to one-handed, one-fingered, hitless Pantheon 5, and base game randomized, with very respectable speedrun times in the two most popular mainboard categories. Why am I listing these off? Well, if I had a therapist, they'd say, It's good to be confident in your achievements. But mostly it's to show that if there was someone who was qualified to talk about how good and or bad Hollow Knight is as an experience, both casually and competitively, I'd be pretty high on that list. Now, Cactus, I hear you saying, how do we know that this isn't going to be tainted by your personal bias? Wouldn't it be better to make a subjective review of Hollow Knight as a whole, rather than pick and choose at mechanics and niche situations that the average player isn't going to experience? To which I will respond, no! This is my video. Go make your own, wise guy. That being said, we do need somewhere to start, so I figured I'd work my way through chronologically and share things I learned from each separate experience as we go along. Also, now's as good a time as any to mention that over 90% of you who watch aren't subscribed. The freest and easiest way to help out with the channel is to hit that funny red button. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Capitalistic shilling aside, let's get into it. Like I said earlier, my casual playthrough took around 30 hours. I don't have any recordings of this playthrough, sadly, and the only thing I remember about my charm build was that I used Dream Shield, Thorns of Agony, and Grimchild. I liked having other things do the hitting for me, I guess. Terrible build, but nonetheless, I found myself drawn to every corner of Hallownest. In my opinion, one of the most compelling ways to get the player interested in the story of the game is to base it in the aftermath of what actually happened. Seeing the results of decisions made long before your time naturally draws the player to ask, how did this happen? How did this get here? Why are things the way they are? Rather than forcing exposition and telling them why they should care about the events that transpired via the protagonist. Imagine if they gave the player lines of speech and it was revealed in a pre-game cutscene that the knight was the Pale King's son and he was here to avenge his father's kingdom. Is it a cool hook? Maybe, but how much more compelling is it to know nothing going in? The only thing the player is given is the Elegy of Hallownest, THK screaming, and the short cutscene of the knight jumping down in King's Pass. What's going on? You have no idea, and you're going to spend the rest of your playtime finding out. Hollow Knight is a game mainly about exploring, but more so about being lost, both physically and mentally. The feeling of, I have no idea where I'm going or what's even going on, from what I can tell, is the most divisive aspect of the story and gameplay. It draws in the players who are curious to know more, but at the same time, it also refuses to hold your hand, which some people don't vibe with, and I can respect that. Some people enjoy linear experiences more, and that's okay. But citing that as a reason why the game is bad never made sense to me. Hollow Knight won't hold your hand in the Ubisoft aspect of having a bajillion things on your HUD at once telling you what to do, while the character in-game gives you answers to puzzles before you really have a chance to solve it. But it does so in much more subtle ways. Throughout the early areas of the game, you'll come to places you can't quite venture to yet. Maybe there's a big-ass roly-poly in your way. Maybe there's a ledge you can't quite reach with your jump. Maybe there's this big, crumbly floor at a dead end. Some people say that King's Pass is the tutorial for Hollow Knight, but I say the tutorial doesn't end until after you get the first spell, Vengeful Spirit. Everything in the Forgotten Crossroads is a one-to-one of what happens during the rest of the game, and I feel like people miss the point of this way too often. Find an area you can't access? Explore somewhere else until you can. Tough boss you found after wandering an area kicking you around? Come back later when you have more gear. The entire gameplay loop of Hollow Knight is personified in this one single area. Then finally you get Vengeful Spirit and are able to continue on your merry way, only to have this idea reinforced again in Green Path and Fungal Wastes. After this, the game finally opens up somewhat, which was the first point in the game I had to take a pause. While this loop is clever, it forces the onus of progression onto the player. The player has to want to explore in order to progress. It can be tedious clearing out a section of the map only to find one or two things you can't access without another ability. Maybe that's just the completionist in me talking, but I do remember being very annoyed that I spent hours exploring Green Path and having to make a mental note about things I would need to come back for. I mean, I guess that's what the pins on the map are for, but the feeling's still there. And this feeling is only magnified when you have the choice paralysis of where you want to go next. There are moments where there feels like there's so much to do, you're being drawn in 4 different directions at once. finally have that thing that lights up dark areas? Have to backtrack to Green Path to find out what that room was all about. Already have Dream Nail? Time to kill this silly little boss, then run all the way back to the Stag Station to get to the Seer to see what reward you get for the next Essence tier. Oh, the reward was a Pale Ore? Oh, okay, so now I have to upgrade my nail again at the smithing place, and what was I doing before this? Again, I'm not saying this design choice is bad, but when the player doesn't know what's important and what's not, it's going to end up like a playthrough of Blueprints, where you're taking notes on every single little minute detail in the case that some random thing you weren't paying attention to becomes important later. Now, I personally didn't experience this, but it's a sentiment I find echoed again and again. Hell, after 30 hours, I thought I had experienced everything the game had to offer and started looking into the 106% speedrun. It was max percent run at the time. And discovered there was a true ending and multiple areas I didn't even know existed. I mean, this game is so huge. I don't think I would have wanted to experience it all on my own without a guide then, let alone how big it's gotten at 112%. Tell me if you've experienced this before, but there comes a time in every longer playthrough where I start feeling like I've had my fill of the game and just want to make it to the end, despite still having fun somewhat. It's happened multiple times with Elden Ring, Hollow Knight, Ori and the Blind Forest, Subnautica, and a couple others I've forgotten, but the point remains. Especially with multiple endings in the equation, how is this tenable for a player taking so long to achieve just the base ending? This is the part of the video essay where I leave the question open-ended so you can leave your thoughts in the comments. And that's basically my only complaint with the casual portion of the game. There are people who say that combat is too difficult, but that wasn't really my experience. I found the combat to be fluid, intuitive, and rewarding. The only bosses I remember having severe troubles with were NKG and Failed Champion, with every other boss being able to defeat in 30 to 40 minutes of attempts, if not less. Maybe it's recency bias coming into effect, but despite my massive amount of playtime, I wouldn't even call Hollow Knight my favorite game. It's top 10 for sure, but the thing that drew me personally was the mechanics. Being good at Hollow Knight feels so satisfying. Look at this boss fight. It's over before I can even get 2 sentences out. Look at this movement, the crispness, the fluidity, the precision. Oh man, it feels so good. If there's a reason that both Monsters and Blue's 112% PB videos have amassed millions of views, it's that seeing someone master their craft is immensely satisfying, even more so if you're the one doing the mastering. Me personally, there's something so gratifying about entering a room and learning the optimal movement to pick up what you need and get to where you need to go, or entering a boss fight and repeating it for 30 minutes to an hour just to get that smidgen of time save that makes it just that much faster. It certainly takes a specific kind of person to enjoy that kind of thing, but what can I say? I'm a bit undiagnosed, but pretty sure. However, therein lies the problem. What happens when the game doesn't cooperate? There are a few mechanics, tidbits, and otherwise unmentionable quirks about the game that you will simply not run into without a more than decent amount of playtime. This is the point where Hollow Knight's facade starts to peel back just a bit. One thing that becomes very evident is there are certain hitboxes that don't quite hit the mark. I could do a whole montage of the ones that are especially egregious, but I'll just do a short slideshow of the ones that I have a personal vendetta against. This one in Green Path that sticks way out of the ceiling for no reason. 80% of walls that look like this don't match up visually with the hitbox that's actually there. Sly and Pantheon's Great Slash hitbox. If you stagger GPZ in the middle of this attack, the hitbox stays active for the rest of the fight. In this arena in Eastmas Grove, the hitbox for this heavy sentry can spawn in the arena before he does. The game is supposed to check where the knight is so the enemies don't spawn on top of them, but for some reason, in this arena only, the hitbox manifests for half a second before spawning on the correct side. THK's hitbox changes when he's staggered, making it a common point to be hit when waking him up. The same thing applies to Lost Cannon Broken Vessel to a smaller degree. And this is only a few examples. Another small tidbit like this that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but is supremely annoying, is this silly little glitch called Landant. Sometimes, for no reason at all, the game can just decide that you haven't landed on the ground for a short period of time. Not the biggest deal in a vacuum, but when you're trying to do precise platforming and need all your movement available to you for the planned movement for that room, and the game just tells you no for no reason, that really grinds my gears. It's like a Christmas present, except the present is coal, but the coal was made with a Sharpie so the black stain doesn't come out. And the bosses. Don't even get me started on the bosses. First of all, every Dream Warrior is bad. Every single one. I don't know what the backers were thinking. It's like they all collectively got together and said, all right guys, we paid a decent amount of money for the privilege of including our own bosses in this masterpiece. Hear me out. What if we made every boss as arduous and tedious as possible? So many of these bosses are at the bottom of people's tier lists for a reason. Markoth, Gorb, Elder Hu, No-Eyes, Marmu? The only two good dream bosses are the one that can be killed instantly, and therefore the fights don't last longer than a few seconds. Which, technically Marmu fits in this category, but through RNG BS and knockback cancels, it still makes the shit list. It's staggering the difference in design the base game bosses have versus these obviously shoehorned junk piles. What patterns are there to learn here? How is my agency as a player being tested farther than dodge the random things thrown at you for X amount of time until they happen to float within range of you? It's as if I was hired to exterminate a massively grown rat colony, but when I get there, it's just an empty Chuck E. Cheese costume. Now, despite my whinging, I do in fact hold the majority of these bosses in high regard. The peak in this game makes up for the drivel I just mentioned. Barely. NKG, Chef's Kiss. Pure Vessel, amazing. Absrad, sign me the hell up. In fact, just so this won't all be negative, let's take a quick look at one of my favorite bosses, Absolute Radiance. Resting at the pinnacle of Pantheon 5, this souped-up version of the True Ending's final boss gives everyone a run for their money their first playthrough. I might touch on this in a later video, but one of my favorite boss design choices in any video game ever is when the game stops holding your hand and forces the player to engage with all of the combat system. Nail builds are going to suffer because getting hits consistently on Absrad in any phase is a nightmare. Spell builds that are used to one-shotting the smaller bosses with Shade Spells and Shaman Stone are eventually going to have to approach somehow to gain more soul. People that have never cast a spell before in their life are going to have a rough time, as Absrad can spawn attacks that carry over into the next one. A well-timed Shade Dash may do the trick, but more often than not, you're better off learning to use the iframes from Descending Dark. Her spawning across the arena multiple times eggs the player on to use Shade Soul, and the teleporting she does in the final phase lends itself perfectly to dodging as much as you can and shrieking when she gets in range. This boss asks you to use every tool in the toolbox. Is it required to do so to defeat her? Not at all. However, I would argue that having the player make all the pieces come together is a perfectly tied bow on a boss gauntlet involving every boss in the game. Now, one complaint I hear quite often from an outside perspective is that the bosses die too fast in the speedrun. And yeah, I kind of agree. The bosses that aren't insta-killed are the most annoying to do in the run because it feels like the game itself is against you. Where's the fun in THK parrying 7 times in a row? Where's the skill expression in No-Eyes teleporting to the opposite side of the arena every time you hit her? How fun is it when Markoth spawns a spear directly beneath you that you can't react to without getting hit because you're falling too fast? Which, again, is only a complaint you have when you're fighting them 50 times in a row. Casual players know they kind of suck, but they get to beat them and move on with their lives. When I'm allowed to showcase my skill as a player is when I feel the most free. Look at this Phase 1 fight for Absolute Radiance. Doesn't that look fun to watch? It sure as hell is fun to play. Now, despite this staggering difference, I'd still say the majority of the speedrun is more execution related than RNG, especially at a high level. But it just makes each RNG time loss more poignant when you know it wasn't your fault. Sometimes the game just says no, and you have to be okay with that. This being said, while it mostly applies to the speedrun portion of the game, the challenge run is a whole other matter. It's hard to describe the shift in tone between, for example, a hitless run and a speedrun. Obviously, it's don't get hit or go fast, but past that, you think and act differently. The knowledge accrued from the speedrun may help, but you have to apply it in a different way. Heck, you have to apply things that you may not have even realized you knew existed. For example, when I was routing blindfolded, one of the biggest hurdles was getting Fluke Nest. For those who don't know, Fluke Nest is notoriously the most broken charm in the game. Hulu made a video on it if you'd like to know more. But suffice it to say, the key to beating the run is this charm. However, in order to get to Fluke Form, you need Dive. To get Dive, you need to traverse Soul Sanctum and kill Soul Master. Sounds pretty intimidating if you can't see, and you'd be right. However, Soul Master doesn't have a very high max HP, as you encounter him fairly early in the playthrough. In fact, he has so little HP that Phase 1 is over after 7 Shade Souls. Which sounds like a lot, until you realize if you wait for this specific attack where he drifts across the middle of the arena, you can get 2 doubles, which means the fight is already never over. From there, it was figuring out how to live until then. Turns out if you stand smack dab against the gate, you'll be able to ever so slightly hear how far away Soul Master's teleports take you, and as a result, know when to jump and dodge the orders. Let's do a little test. I'll play some sound effects from the Soul Master fight, and you try and guess if it is close, middle, or far away. I'll play each sound twice. Ready? It's moments like this that embolden the appreciation I have for the sound design in this game. Christopher Larkin truly is a mad genius. I know the distance thing is probably the result of some programming, but my point still stands. Figuring this out for the first time was like shooting serotonin into my veins. Not in the sense of me patting myself on the back for being such a smart boy, but using prior knowledge and experience I had to figure out the solution to a problem I didn't know I was going to have was immensely rewarding. So much so that it's basically the only thing that kept me going during the routing and eventual running of the blindfolded experience. Now, going forward, what does this mean for Silksong? Well, one would certainly hope they'd learn from these mistakes and cling to their successes, but I'm almost certain they don't see it that way. As I've already stated, the casual player would almost never happen upon the things I've mentioned. Heck, 90% of the fun speedrun tech was patched out by Team Cherry, simply because it was something common enough that a casual player may stumble upon it in their playthrough, such as hitting a lever through the floor to sequence break, or inventory drops. It's my personal headcanon that they did this just to mess with the speedrunners, but in reality, they probably just saw something, said, "Oh, that's not how that's supposed to work," and patched it out. Based on past examples, see my video on Hollow Knight glitches, Day 1 Silksong will most likely be incredibly buggy. Not in the game-ruining sense, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone figures out out-of-bounds glitches and menu shenanigans within the first week. Past that, it's pretty hard to say what the game's going to look like. For me, the most reassuring thing is that the reason it took so long to come out is because they were having too much fun making the game. Nothing screams a cinema-level experience than if the people making it are having the times of their lives. The movement seems fluid, the mechanics look polished, and the art looks gorgeous. You're free to make your own judgments based on promotional material and demo footage, but I, for one, am more than happy to wait and see what Team Cherry has in store. Thanks for watching!